Okay, thank you everybody for coming. I'm here to announce my intention to run for a full 4-year term as mayor. This, of course, will be my last political campaign, and if successful, it will give me the privilege of bringing to fruition the work that has been the focus of my attention for the last several years, both on the city council and as mayor. Back in 2014, I was privileged to be on a steering committee for the comprehensive plan update. And it took just about a whole year in 2014 to go through that with several public meetings and uncounted meetings of the steering committee. And one of the comments, or a couple of the comments that we received at the time from the public, and a lot of them were very positive comments about the future of the city, was that, we know about these plans. You're going to spend a lot of time and effort on this. It's going to be put in a binder. It's going to be adopted by the council. It's going to sit on a shelf and collect dust, and nobody's going to ever move these initiatives forward. And at the time I said, not this time. Not this time. And I was true to my word because the next year, 2015, not long after the comprehensive plan was adopted by the city council, was when I first ran for a seat on that council. And in going door to door in that campaign, one of the biggest feedbacks that I received from constituents was the problem with blight, the problem of disinvested buildings in neighborhoods, how it detracted from the value of the community, from the value of neighborhoods, how it robbed people from their investment in their homes. And it only took one or two derelict houses or abandoned houses in a neighborhood to detract from the value of the whole neighborhood, and also the quality of life of the people who live there. So when I took my seat on the council in 2016, this was at the top of my to-do list. And right away, I applied for a grant from LISC, which eventually established the Neighborhood Quality Administrator. And the reason for that was the recognition that I had was that we did have codes that set minimum standards of decency in neighborhoods. But those codes were not being enforced effectively. And it was because the enforcement function was left to the fire department and the police department. It was kind of back burner stuff. These, DPW, the fire department, the police department had lots of other work to do. And then in their spare time, they were expected to go out and enforce blight. So with the Neighborhood Quality Administrator, which has been grant funded ever since 2016, or actually it began in 2017 when we actually hired someone in the spring of 2017. It has been grant funded ever since. That office is primarily charged with the function of code enforcement, of maintenance code enforcement. And also we made some changes to the code to make this enforcement more even-handed, fairer, and more efficient to enforce. In addition to that, I drafted in 2016 the vacancy ordinance. Now, what that did was it imposed requirements. If you owned a vacant building, you had to register that vacant building with the fire department, and then it was monitored. And you had to have some kind of a plan of either renovation of some sort, or sale, or rehab, continued, or demolition could be. And that's been enormously successful. Between the time that was imposed, there were about 367 or 368 vacant buildings in Gloversville. And since then, we have reduced that number of vacant buildings to approximately 180-something vacancies. But eliminating blight takes a lot more than code enforcement. You have to get to the root causes of blight. Every year, the County of Fulton, who is our foreclosing agent, forecloses on properties. These are tax foreclosures. And eventually the county takes title to these properties after 3 years of default in taxes. And then those properties are sold at auction to the highest bidder. So historically, about 40 some odd houses, 40 some odd buildings, 40 some odd properties per year in Gloversville alone go into that tax foreclosure. And we've made some progress over the last couple of years because in 2019, only 34 properties went into tax foreclosure. And this past year, the number is 23. But 23 is 23 too many as far as I'm concerned. My goal, and so the goal of this administration, is to eventually put the city in a position to be able to preempt the county auction. To put the city in a position to have the wherewithal to be able to acquire tax foreclosed properties and to be able to demolish the ones that require demolition and to be able to then turn over those that merit rehab to local developers that will covenant to rehabilitate and then resell to local owners those properties. Now this would be an enormous lift, but we're a lot closer to the achievement of that lift because of a relationship that we have developed, that I have developed with New York State Homes and Community Renewal. And back in December of 2019, a little more than a year ago, I hosted the Commissioner of New York State Homes and Community Renewal, Ruth Ann Viskauskas, to Gloversville. She arrived here in December of 2019 with several of her senior staff members. We gave her a presentation of all the things that we had been doing and all the things that we were planning on doing, and then gave her and her staffers a tour of the city. Since then, we have had a close working relationship with Homes and Community Renewal. And that relationship has developed into what we call the Utopia Project. And that is the construction by Utopia, which is a corporation that builds houses. And these are modular houses that are state-of-the-art houses. That project will get off the ground here this spring. Utopia will be building its first house in Gloversville. The reason we were included in that, and we're in Gloversville as a pilot project for Utopia, is because as soon as Homes and Community Renewal received word that this corporation wanted to build energy-efficient, state-of-the-art houses in New York State, the first thing they thought of was Gloversville, and they were referred to us. We've had several meetings with their engineers. We've had several Zoom meetings with their chief executives, and we'll see that first house. Now, along with that, because of the Utopia Project, we have been invited by HCR to apply for $400,000 in funding so that we can re-grant first-time homebuyer credits for people in our community, working families, who would like to buy one of these new homes. And we've identified several other sites for additional homes. If this first home is successful, we hope that there will be dozens of those homes built in Gloversville. The other thing that brings us a lot closer to tackling blight is that we have been told by senior staffers at HCR that we will be able to apply for funding for acquisition and demolition. So this would be the first time that the city, if this pans out, that we would have the wherewithal, hopefully in 2021, to be able to apply for grants, to actually be able to preempt the county auction and take title to properties that would be in tax foreclosure. What this would do is stop the recycling of blight back into the community, to cut at this disinvestment at its source. Now, this would be an enormous achievement. It requires the cultivation of close relationships based on confidence and trust, not only with the other members of our own government, but with other governmental agencies, with the County Board of Supervisors, with Fulton County CRG, and with other state agencies such as Homes and Community Renewal. We have been successful up to now in maintaining those relationships and bringing them forward. And we hope to be able to, within the next few years, make enormous difference in our neighborhoods. This would be an enormous breakthrough in the value of Gloversville neighborhoods. Now, I'm going to turn from blight to economic development. When I took my seat on the council in 2016, the city of Gloversville was in a lawsuit with Fulton County Center for Regional Growth. The city was in a lawsuit with the chief economic development authority in the county. Just the existence of that lawsuit was like a brick wall between Gloversville and large private investment. So, having been a judge for 20 years, I knew something about lawsuits. And I knew that in most lawsuits, the parties to the lawsuit did not want to be in a lawsuit. They just felt that they had no choice. So I opened up the lines of communication between our city council, my colleagues on the council, and the board of directors of CRG. And we started to talk about possible avenues of settlement. And within months, that lawsuit was settled. And not only settled, but we have established a working partnership with CRG that has been enormously productive for the city. Just to give you some examples, CRG moved its offices to downtown Gloversville, took title to a building. It now has a business incubator that it's opened on the second floor of that building, and it's moving forward with redevelopment. The city applied for and received a grant of $450,000 for the redevelopment of that building for CRG. Together with CRG, we established the Gloversville Loan Fund. That fund is headed by a board of directors that consists of myself as mayor and 3 council members, and also 3 members of the CRG board of directors. It has made several loans since its inception, since the settlement in 2016, and continues with approximately a $900,000 pool of money. Together, we established the Office of the Downtown Development Specialist. And for the first few years, that office was headed up by Jennifer Jennings, and the focus was on community events. Now, that office is headed by James Hannes, and the focus is on private investment, business investment, and economic development. And one of the biggest things that has come from that partnership is the city won an EPA citywide assessment grant. That was spearheaded by Ron Peters at CRG and his consultants. That grant is a $300,000 grant to do phase 1 and phase 2 environmental review of our brownfield sites, our former industrial sites in the city, citywide. We've identified 12 sites for this. Only 2 cities in the state of New York received that grant. We were one of 2 cities. And at this point, we've almost completed that. By sometime before spring, we will have the data from those assessments, and we'll be able to use that data for major funding for cleanup. This takes the barriers to redevelopment, the scars of our former industry, out of the way for Gloversville. And then, of course, we partnered with CRG in the buildings, the row of buildings on South Main Street that have been, for almost 2 decades, a blight and an eyesore. And here we are with development funded by a grant for the project and the 4 buildings in a row on South Main Street. And we're partnering with CRG 50/50 and the Gloversville Loan Fund to demolish the Latour building that has been an eyesore for so long and replace it with a versatile public space that will enhance the value of all of the neighboring buildings on South Main Street. Aside from CRG, I want to mention a major step forward in that we received a major grant to do the local waterfront revitalization plan. Now, that sounds like it's all about the waterfront. In fact, in spite of its name, it's almost a citywide plan. It covers almost 60% of the land area of the city, and it's a major plan to transform and redevelop 13 key areas of the city. And this opens the door to major funding for implementation. This spring, that plan will be submitted to the state. The New York State Department of State will be reviewing that plan, and if approved, all of the projects that have been identified in that plan will be qualified for 50% state funding for implementation, both public and private projects. So that's a major step forward. I want to tell you that I have been a long time at this, decades. We developed Trail Station Park. I advocated for the Fulton, the rail trail that goes through Gloversville and Johnstown. We built the Farmers Market Pavilion. We restored the Glove Theater. This has been since the 1980s. Planted hundreds of trees, done beautification things, but it is only since I've been in city government, only since 2016, that we have really been able to move the needle forward, to transform the city, to be able to transform the city. And let me give you an example, a few examples of what's been accomplished just in the last 3 years. Just in the past 2 to 3 years, as a result of this focus, as a result of paying attention, we have received over $6.8 million in development grants for a variety of redevelopment projects, both business development and neighborhood improvement. $6.8 million. Contrast this with what happened before. With the exception of the $4 million that was received for SD Phase 2, generally, the city has received about $400,000 a year in CDBG grants that were applied for by CDA. And that was for housing rehab. We continue to apply for those grants every year. And it's been upped from $400,000 to $500,000 a year. But that's been the history. So it shows you exactly how far we've come just in the past few years in terms of grant funding for a variety of projects. And the physical changes to those grants, we will be able to start seeing this spring. Just a few examples are the City National Project. The redevelopment of the former City National Bank is under construction now. And I am told it will house a new credit union in downtown. Our pedestrian safety grant will break ground this spring. And that will be the redo of the street, the entire streetscape for North and South Main Street. Etopia will build its first house in Gloversville, starting in April at the corner of Park and Forest Street. Trail Station Park will be expanded to almost double its size to the east side of Cayadetta Creek, so that entire area, and it will feature a spray pad. So it'll be that redevelopment. And also, the Litauer building will come down. The facade will come down. A facade that we wanted to save, but was impossible to do that because of financial constraints. And so that entire line of buildings on South Main Street, finally, after decades, will be changed and rehabilitated. So we've come a long way since 2014, when we were talking about the comprehensive plan and having those public meetings. But we have a long way to go. We're not there yet, but I can see it from here. I can see a thriving city, a city with clean, attractive neighborhoods, restored street infrastructure, well-maintained parks and recreational facilities, and a growing, flourishing business community that's creating jobs and adding to the city's tax base. So this year, I'll be asking the voters of Gloversville to give me another 4 years so that I can move these projects forward, so that I can bring to fruition the work that has been the focus of my attention for the last several years. Thank you.